Good afternoon to the Domino pop-up audience. Thank you so much for coming back after lunch. I was a little bit scared when I saw the agenda and the power of suggestion with the topic immediately before lunch, in other words, beer, that might create some ideas and you might be out sampling the local tavern scene in beautiful downtown Chicago. Then again, this is also the Merchandise Mart. Many of you may have offices in this building, and there could well be kegs on tap. Maybe it was just a quick trip for you during the noon hour, and if so, thanks for coming back. Also, thank you to the conference organizers for putting topics of interest to the data science community front and center. So we've had Wi-Fi, and we've had beer, and now we have your 401k for the next 10 minutes. So I guess that may explain why you all came back. We're going to talk about investments for a few minutes. So my name is Mark Prindeville, as was mentioned, and I will forward to my own talk. There it is. I actually worked in the analytics function of our investments unit for 23 years before switching over to the corporate analytics function, which is called Data Discovery and Decision Science, 1 month ago. Now, you may not think of Allstate as an investments firm. You'll think of it as an insurance company, and you'd be right. But investments is a very important part of what happens at Allstate. So we manage about $80 billion, and that produces about half of the income in the firm on an annual basis. Now, how does that work? So hopefully all of you are Allstate customers. If you're not, come see me after the talk, and we'll set something up. And periodically, every month or every 6 months, you'll send us a little bit of money to insure your vehicle or your home. And we'll take that money and we will nurture it, and we will water it, and we will grow it. And then eventually, unfortunately, you'll have an accident or a life event, and we'll send it back to you. Insurance is so competitive, it just so happens that the amount of money we take in is about equal to the amount of money that goes back. Where Allstate will make its money, a lot of it, is on that in-between period. It's called the float. So you send us $5, we grow it into $7, and then we send you back your $5 with the law of large numbers applied, right? So it's a very important process at Allstate or any insurance company. I was involved with that for 23 years and then 1 month again for the corporate function. And so then we asked ourselves, I was asked to talk at this event, and I said, should I regale the crowd with my wisdom gained over 4 weeks doing corporate analytics? And that was voted down, fortunately for you. And we have some experts that I'm introducing that will come up on stage to tell you all about exciting new areas in which we're applying corporate analytics. Instead, I'm going to lead with an investments example, but it's a very relevant example. The concepts that my colleagues are going to talk about, which are data, analytics, performance benchmarks, and attribution, these are bedrock concepts to a good, solid investment process. They've evolved through the years, and I'm going to mention some of the ways in which they've evolved briefly. But they would apply to any good performance management process, including new ones that we're building on the insurance side of the Allstate house as well. So this is a teaser for what's about to come. Now we'll begin with a question, as we do with all analytics problems. How much value is my asset manager adding? Now, if I only knew the answer to that question, I could make more informed decisions. I could take actions, and I could increase or improve my future investment results. For instance, if all the money was managed by outside parties, which is the case for some of the money at Allstate, I could sack the bad managers. I could move the money over to the good managers. And all the managers in between, I could call them and renegotiate my fees down. That would improve my performance over the long run, as long as the performance was consistent from period to period or persistent. If they're internal managers, we can work with them, discover the root cause of some of the underperformance. Is it resources? Do they not have enough quantitative models, which is often the case? What is it? So we can improve the process. The fact is, it's really hard to answer this question. Even for a big, sophisticated investment shop like Allstate, I can only imagine when you look at your 401k, it's difficult to figure out what's going on. The fact is, most of us are mostly blind in this area, and it's not for lack of data. The investment managers of the world pepper you with too much data, and I think it's on purpose. They have 1-year performance, and 3 years, and 5 years, and 10 years, and lifetime. And there's absolute performance, and there's relative performance, and there's like 10 different benchmarks that they compare it to. And there's cumulative performance and risk adjusted. And they know that if they throw enough numbers on the page, at least one of them is going to look good. And that's the one, magically, that gets bolded and circled, and that's what the quarterly write-up is all about. Look at our 7-year performance when you adjust for the average temperature of jungles in Peru. And I did this for 23 years. We never had a bad quarter. It was amazing. What we need is a framework. And that framework has to have 2 elements, 2 key elements. Number 1, there have to be solid performance benchmarks. So we have a rock foundation with which to judge performance. And there has to be a system of attribution. Why did my manager differ from those performance benchmarks? So 2 elements. How did they evolve through time? So a brief history of what I'm calling factor-based performance attribution. I take you back to the 1960s. Judging from this room, very few of you were investing in the 1960s. But put on your imagination caps. You probably invested with a stockbroker at the time, an all-purpose money manager who selected for you a portfolio of stocks, and that's where they managed your money. I call this the bottom line world, because all you got was at the end of the quarter was a piece of paper saying, this is how your portfolio did. And the only really relevant touch point you would have been 0. Like, did he make money for me, he or she? That sounds good. If in this period the stockbroker made 20% for you, you were like, wow, 20%. Thank you, Mr. Stockbroker. You are awesome. Can I send you even more fees than what we agreed to? That's how it worked. Or the other benchmark you might have had back then was your neighbors. Hey, how did you do in the market last week? Oh, I did pretty well. Got some winners. Fast forward to the 1970s. Well, academics and practitioners started to look at performance, and they noticed that if that was magic, that 20%, if that was magic, there was a lot of correlated magic going on. Stockbrokers who were doing well over here, there tended to be stockbrokers doing well over here too. And during bad periods, they all tended to do poorly. And so what emerged was the concept of the market. You know, during a certain period, what if all stocks went up? That's surely going to influence the returns that your stockbroker gave you. And so in the 1970s, you look at this statement, and we see that the whole stock market, the S&P 500, went up by 15%. Well, that means that the stockbroker or the mutual fund manager added 5%. That's a good thing. I'm still happy with my stockbroker and mutual fund manager, but do I look at 5% quite the way I looked at 20? Has a little bit of the magic faded away? Then we fast forward to the 70s and 80s, late 70s and 80s, right here in Chicago. Eugene Fama and Kenneth French. Look, they said there must be more than one factor in the stock market, and they found a few others. For instance, small cap stocks, small companies, they have more ability to grow through time. They're very risky, they don't have as much capital as a large firm, but they do give you higher returns through time. That's a factor. If your money manager is mostly in small cap stocks, you should expect them to outperform over the long run because they're investing that way. Similarly, value stocks or low price stocks, buy low, sell high. Those tend to outperform through time as well. Once you adjust for small caps, if my manager, if that's what they're buying, small companies, that may account for another 3% of that 20% performance. There might only be 2% of extra or alpha that my manager is actually giving me. In the modern era, researchers have found even more factors. For instance, momentum. Stocks that have recently done well, they tend to keep doing well. Everybody's jumping on the gravy train while times are good. So if my money manager is using momentum, there might only be 1% alpha left. Now these techniques, momentum and value and small caps, managers have always known about that. The stockbrokers over there on the left, that's how they provided good returns through time. But all of this has become transparent to us, the investment community, and these blue items here, these are all available now for almost no cost. You can buy an ETF that does these things, that gives you the S&P 500, small caps in the S&P 500, Small caps that have done well recently with momentum. You can buy those for almost nothing now. So benchmarks have evolved. We started from a benchmark of 0 to the stock market, to a specific segment of the stock market. That was our benchmark. And then the very last step is attribution. Do I know how my manager is beating the benchmark? If they are, is that pink even positive? Then the other thing that has happened is people have realized the magic is not the 20. The magic, if it exists, is the 1. And I am not going to pay massive stockbroker fees on 20. I'm going to be very skeptical, and I'm going to look for the 1. And so you've seen asset management fees in the industry come down sharply over the last 20 years as this sort of progress has been made in understanding performance. So how are we going to use this to improve our own performance? And I'll give you a little snapshot of how we do it at Allstate. So what actually occurred? So taking you back to the 1960s, the first thing we look at is performance. I've constructed an example where you're investing in three things. First one is large cap stocks. Those are solid core holdings in your portfolio. They're there for long-term staying power. Allstate is large cap stock. You definitely should have Allstate in your portfolio if you want to go ahead and buy some right now. Small cap stocks. So these smaller companies, they're there because they're going to give us a little bit of extra return through time. And then value stocks. Again, a little bit of extra return through time. All right. We've cleverly changed the names to protect the innocent. The actual managers are not named M1, M2, and M3, but that's how we're going to refer to them. And we can see in the 1960s, we look at our statement at the end of the quarter and we say, oh my God, M3 rocks. I love M3. I'm not mad at M1. 15 is not bad, but I need more of that 25. I'm going to sell some M1. I'm going to buy me some M3. Okay, so that's the action in the 1960s. Now we fast forward to the age of performance benchmarks, 1970s, 1980s. I am now correctly benchmarking M1 to a large cap stock index, which returned 12% for the period. I'm correctly benchmarking manager 2 to a small cap stock index, because that's what I asked manager 2 to do, which returned 19%. And my value manager to a value index, which returned 27%. Now, I look at the landscape and I say to myself, okay, I had M3 all wrong. M3 is actually a dog. If I had just put my money into the Vanguard Value Index Fund, I would have done 2% better. They charged me fees and they cost me 2%. Meanwhile, M1, who I was making fun of like 2 minutes ago, M1 is now my new rock star. Look, they outperformed their index by 3%. So what do I do with this information in the 70s and 80s? I say, well, maybe I actually shouldn't be actively managing my value stocks. Maybe I'll either look for a different manager, or maybe I'll just go passive. I'll just invest in the index. That'd be fine. That at least would stop the drain of 2% out of my portfolio. Okay, the modern era. We now have the right benchmarks in place. What we need is attribution. Why did the managers outperform or underperform? And is it repeatable? That +3 up there, is that going to stick around? Because that's the real question. The plus, what's done is done. I can't undo what happened last period. Do I think that +3 has staying power? So we use modern data techniques to fully understand the performance of our investment managers, including all the different factors on the previous page, momentum and low volatility and value and small and so on. We can pin down exactly how much value came from investing in picking stocks. Now, manager 1 might tell us in the prospectus of their fund, we're really good at picking stocks. We have people with 30 years of experience who can dissect the balance sheet of a company, and we will find the ones with superior earnings power. Great. So then we do the attribution. Are they good at picking stocks? Well, it turned out in this example, no. What happened during the period was, for manager 1, they put on currency bets. They had more US stocks in the portfolio than international stocks, and the dollar went up. Fairly random, not part of their core investment process, and therefore we would say to ourselves, I don't think that's repeatable. What we were looking for was being able to pick stocks. Didn't happen. Manager 2, however, actually demonstrated the ability, which matches what was in their prospectus, to be able to pick stocks, up 3% on stock picking. Now it happened that the currency bets went the other way for them. They actually had more European stocks and the US dollar went up, and that wasn't good. But that sort of thing will even out through time. The dollar rises, the dollar falls. That's noise, and we're trying to get past the noise. Manager 2 is demonstrating a real ability to pick stocks. So it turns out the answer to our exercise is not Manager 3 is the rock star, not Manager 1 is the rock star, it's actually Manager 2. And we'll work with Managers 1 and 3 if they're internal managers to improve their performance, or if they're outside managers, or if we just are not able to do so internally, we'll look for other managers, or we will just index that and buy the market. So that's how we're using analytics and a performance process to improve through time at Allstate, basically. That's a really simplified example of what we do. So in closing, and to transition us to the next topic, performance assessment is built on data, analytics, benchmarks, and attribution. It's common to many walks of life. Some things that occurred to me on the train this morning. Is that this or that marketing campaign, is that effective? Is Goose Island a good beer or not? Is Mitch Trubisky really a good quarterback? You know, I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'm a kind of a skeptic. You know, you'd have to look versus other NFL quarterbacks, you know, maybe so-so, versus the history of Bears quarterbacks very definitely. So there's different lenses you could look at that. Performance assessment also common in the insurance industry, as we're about to talk about. And we are now in position to acquire and analyze data to build framework in entirely new areas, including our agent to customer sales process that we're about to talk about. So I will bring up our two experts. Ryan Dunn is Director of Sales Analytics. He has been with Allstate for 11 years. He has experience in product management, market intelligence research, and distribution. He also loves to landscape and garden, and he's wishing that the growing season were longer. Tian Barwick is a data strategy senior manager in D3 at Allstate. She's been with Allstate for 15 years, spanning finance and analytics, and she is an avid 90s boy band fan who can give you in-depth data and insights about the Backstreet Boys. As a closing treat, I actually have a listing of her 5 favorite Backstreet Boys songs. Okay, number 5, quit playing games with my data. Number 4, I want it collected and stored that way. Number 3, helpless when the server's down. Number 2, I guess I'm going in reverse order, right? Incomplete, but backfilled appropriately. And the last one is shape of my cumulative distribution function. Those are her top 5 Backstreet Boys.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for setting that up and the great introduction. So I'm Ryan. This is Tian. We're here to talk to you about how Allstate is expanding the collection of data on all fronts, how we're governing it, and how that is enabling our wonderful, talented data science and engineering teams to build good analytics and insights, but also to capture and control for some of those confounds or benchmarks that Mark was kind of going in. So we'll start out with a basic question. Do you have everything that you need? And in the 1960s, they said absolutely yes, right? And then they pushed a little bit more on the question, or what is the behavior we're trying to get out of this? And they found some more information that could be helpful in controlling for what that performance or add to the scenario was. And so in the insurance context, we have all these if I only knew type questions that we're continuously trying to answer and improve the answers on. So things like, how are my customers' lives changing? And if I better understood that, I could more proactively tailor treatments to them. We typically think about the insurance interactions that are channeled to Allstate as a corporation or our agencies, and they're usually pretty negative experiences, right? No one's calling and saying, thank you, you lowered my rates. They're calling and saying, hey, I'm leaving you because you just increased my rates. Or it's a claims experience, right? And that's why we actually introduced a claim sat guarantee. If you don't have a great claims experience, we will give you your money back to try to counter that. But having better data around the changes that are occurring in people's lives will also enable us to have more proactive outreach and create more positive touch points and try to create a little bit more balance over there. We also have this question of like, how often do we ask for the sale, right? We've got tens of thousands of producers across the country, and we really can't tell how aggressively they are pursuing asking for the sale. Maybe they're just taking an email and saying, hey, here's your quote, and call me if you're interested. And that's probably leaving some business on the table, both for us and for our agents. Or how effective is a given marketing treatment? And as we want to better understand, is the marketing treatment driving the interaction, or is it some other thing that's driving a connection between us and a consumer? And knowing a little bit more about this equation is going to help us understand who to treat at the right time with the right message. So I'm sure you all have had this, how am I not getting engagement in X initiative or product that you've rolled out there? And the key to unlocking that is collecting more data and getting more insight into the process to effectively get closer in that outcome. So Tian's going to walk through a little bit on how Allstate's data strategy is evolving and supporting the analytics development process.
Thank you, Ryan. Are you guys able to hear me? Okay. Great. So thanks, Ryan, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. It's very nice to be able to share our data story with you and the exciting path that we're on to help innovate in new ways using our data and analytics to delight not only our workforce, but also our customers. So I lead the data strategy team, a fantastic team that is helping to develop our integrated data platform. Our data strategy is anchored on the belief that it is through our analytics and insights that we will create this competitive advantage to be able to win in the marketplace and deliver more value. So when I talk about value, it's about how we're going to increase revenue, reduce cost, and improve the customer experience. It feels a little weird in front of this group to talk about the importance of data from a predictive modeling and analytics perspective. It's probably like I'm preaching to the choir, but I've been to enough stakeholder meetings with data science teams, including Ryan's, as well as I see it in my own social media feed, that the frustration and pain that exists. So let me try this out with you guys. That in data science, 80% of the time is spent preparing the data. And the other 20% of the time is complaining about preparing the data. Is that right? Show of hands. But that's why I'm here. That's why I have this job, and it's my mission to help adjust that paradigm. So it's clear and apparent that we need clean data that's integrated, accessible, formatted, and well-defined so that we can stitch it together to really speed up the analytic lifecycle process to turn data into insights. And it's no different for Allstate. So we're 80 years strong, and we have vast amounts of information. But would it surprise you that it's sprawled across thousands upon thousands of databases and silos? And partially that's because Allstate is a family of companies with over 15 different business units and market-facing businesses. So to be able to bring that all together, we'll be able to create incredible value. So with this change in the marketplace, we definitely identified, and through our sprawling data across databases, that we needed to invest more in our centralized data assets. And at the same time, as my colleague, Victui, stated earlier today, that the world is changing around us as well. Technology, tools, and capabilities continue to sprout and make things easier. The cost of computing and storage continues to go down, and our consumer expectations are on the rise. People are willing to provide more information so that they can, in return or in exchange, get a better experience and more personalized, tailored products. So it really encouraged us to think differently and ask the question, if I only knew. If I only knew, when are we creating this data? How is it being captured? What events are generating it, and how is it defined? And then, after we've captured it, where are we storing it so we can serve it up to the analytic teams? So during our data journey, we had to figure out how we were going to influence people to think differently about data, to not treat it as the cost of doing business. So an example of this, so we generate millions upon millions of quotes for people who are interested in our insurance products and our protection products. And our sales producers, they're eager and hungry to be able to deliver these quotes. But when you think about just that business process, if you're trying to quickly do that, sometimes our sales producers are sacrificing the quality of the data to be able to click through faster to generate that quote. And we wanted to think broadly about the value of this data. We're leaving a lot on the table if we only think about the value as important in that business process. So early on in our journey, we knew that introducing data quality measures, data governance, and data management was important. So what is the data that I'm talking about? So it includes not only our structured data, but also unstructured data as well. So from a structured perspective, this is easy to search through relational databases, and it includes a lot of our traditional data that we're capturing. So through our normal business processes, that's transactional information from a policy, claim, and quotes perspective. Then on the unstructured side of the house, this is not as easy to search, right? There's no predefined format or organization, so it's harder to process, collect, and analyze. And this is, again, where a lot of the growth in the world is occurring. So I think a stat that's pretty familiar with everyone is that 80% of all the data that's created is unstructured data. So today, how many of you have already posted something on social media that you're at 1871? I see one hand, or at the domino pop-up today. Any other hands? So I know I have not yet. Ryan, have you?
Not yet.
Should we take this opportunity to take an unstructured data picture? I encourage everyone else to do so as well. Okay, smile, Ryan. Should we take one with the group? Come on. Everybody, get excited. Yay. So it's estimated that as consumers, we contribute at least 20 times or more each day to unstructured data, and businesses are no different, right? So we are continuing to increase the amount of unstructured data that we have. And again, it's through a lot of the normal course of business that we go through. So in the event of a claim, when people call us to report that claim, in the past, sometimes we would record that phone call, right? We wanted to use it for training purposes, to understand how it was going. We would have a training unit who would provide coaching, and then we would delete that recording because we needed to clean the tape for the next time. But now, we want to record every single recording phone call, and we also want to capture in high quality all the pictures and videos because we know that this can help to enable a lot of that game changing, and it can really improve the experience of our consumers as well. So in the event that you do get into a claim, knock on wood, one of the first things you're probably doing is taking a picture of the damage. You want to send it to somebody and you want to tell them that you're okay, but then you also want to share with them what the damage looks like. And now you can also send that picture into Allstate, and we're going to already start to estimate what the damage will be. Whereas in the past, you would call us, we would need to schedule when a claim adjuster can come out and physically take a look at the damage to be able to assess what that estimate is going to be. So as we collect more and more of this unstructured data and all of this other information, it's really important in terms of how we're going to organize it. So this is part of our MDM, or our Master Data Management strategy. So we have 9 MDMs categorized into people data, process data, and asset data. So from a people perspective, this is all our consumer data, along with producers and our workforce. From a process perspective, this is all that transactional activity that occurs for policies, quotes, and claims. And then our assets. From a location perspective, this is a lot of rich property information. And then from a vehicle and telematics, think about all of the information from sensor information from your vehicles, along with all the specs that are really important for us to understand. So an example of this, our consumer MDM, this has our most comprehensive view of a person. It's not only our internal data, so our 21 million active customers, along with prospects and former customers, but we've integrated it with external data as well. So we actually know information about our entire US population. So it's going to include things like what products do you have or have had with us in the past, if you've had any claims, and also demographic information, so the address in which you live in. So we've standardized that, it's clean information, so now we can easily hop in and connect to these other MDMs. So naturally with an address, I can go into location MDM, understand more about the property details, the specs, history and activity that has occurred at that property for us to be able to generate more and more insights. So with this information, we have 3 examples of how we are able to turn this into an improved experience and lower cost. So I will emphasize that our MDMs are really just the tip of the iceberg. It's not a game changer on its own. It really requires the partnership with our analytic teams and our business partners to identify and leverage the talent that they have to make data-driven decisions so that we can increase revenue, reduce costs, and improve the experience. So of these 3 examples, I'll hit the first one first, naturally. So our customers, as they become new customers of Allstate, we want to make the onboarding experience really easy and simple and personalized. So as we leverage that consumer MDM, we have this complete view of the person and what are their outstanding steps? What do they have next to do in that onboarding process? And in doing so, we were able to strategically promote things like e-delivery to pair up with the preferences that they have in terms of how they want to interact with us and how they want to receive their information. In doing so, it allowed for greater adoption of some of the enrollment in our e-delivery, such as e-bill and e-policy, to reduce our costs and improve the experience. Second one is around our inspection data. So whenever we insure a property, we want to take a look and inspect the property, understand the roof type, roof age, a lot of information, leveraging actually going out there and some of this external data. And if a customer of ours moves and a new homeowner wants to move into that same address, we want to take advantage of inspection data that's recent. We don't need to go out there and do another property inspection. Kind of a no-brainer, right? But we had to actually think differently about how we can use this information and ask our business partners to revisit and change business processes that has been decades old. And then finally, with our claims photos that we are able to get collected from claimants and our customers in the event of a claim, we're testing and experimenting with machine learning to identify within the photo where is the damage, and then based on the damage, what is the estimate to be able to repair and be able to make them whole again. So these 3 examples are something that we're really proud of in terms of how we're able to improve the customer experience and reduce cost. Also want to share and have Ryan talk about our sales effectiveness use case that helps us to increase our revenues. So Ryan, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we'll get into a deeper look here. I'm going to flip through these really quickly. As Mark mentioned, we feel pretty blind sometimes when we just think about the structured data that we have today. We know something occurred, like a quote, and we know something followed that, like a bind event where they purchased something from us. But if we think about like the phone calls that actually happen, and Allstate might take anywhere near 80 to 100 million phone calls a year between consumers and customers with us. And if all the interactions are happening there, or the majority of the interactions are happening there, we're somewhat flying blind. So how are we supposed to effectively have great customer experience and improve the sales process and coach up our tens of thousands of licensed reps out there if we don't really know the how they're going there or what we should expect through the sales process? So we touched on that a little bit. So we're going to really talk about how voice capture, so capturing the recorded calls, transcribing those, and applying different NLP techniques is allowing us to provide a much more robust context to why certain events happen or why certain events don't happen. Tien mentioned having integrated data between unstructured and structured is incredibly key, and we're highly utilizing the MDMs in the sales space as we now capture this voice data and need to pair it with structured events or responses. We can do this because we have a large distribution system that's already utilizing voice over internet carriers, so we can record through that. We now have more cost-effective storage at scale, so we no longer need to purge the tape after we've done it. No one's on tape, hopefully, anymore. And then you couple that with the emerging NLP techniques and pair that with really, really good talent that we have at Allstate. It kind of creates a situation where we can start using this information to provide a much more rich context to those hundreds of millions or tens of millions of interactions that we have on an annual basis. So, high level, this is just a generic sales process. If you sell a product, you probably have something that flows left to right like this. You establish a connection. You try to understand what the intent of that interaction is. You have some products you want to cover them with or provide out to them. You may tailor those products to fit their needs. And then ultimately, any good salesperson is going to try to close the deal at the end. That better protects the consumer or serves them and their needs, and also puts some money in that individual's pocket. So we think voice can help us understand these linkage between these steps. So how people go from A to B, but then the richness of A to B in that interaction. So when we think about voice, Voice really helps us in two domains. I think the biggest thing is we just don't even know if people are trying at certain paces. Are you actually going through these steps? So it creates a feedback loop for sales managers who want salespeople to do certain things, and that kind of gives you the try, did you do it? But then if you're also trying, it actually gives you context for how well you're doing it. So you get over the first hurdle, solve that you just don't do it and you need to start doing it. But then because we have really successful people doing all parts of this chain really well, we can find out what the best people are doing, find out the people who have opportunities, and then translate that over to them. So we ultimately bring everybody up. So you can understand, hey, why are people coming to Allstate to get a quote today? Did they have a bad prior claim experience at a competitor? Is that something we can learn from that and take advantage and maybe mail some more people from other carriers? What do they care about? What do they value? We want to sell them lots of products, but we want to also sell them the right products with the right coverage to meet their needs. Did we personalize it? And then ultimately, are we asking for the sale? Are we trying to close the deal in the moment? Or are we letting them walk out the door and go somewhere else? So putting this in motion, and this will kind of be a parallel to what Mark kind of showed, and I think it's a really great way to kind of tie it all together. This is the 1960s version of Allstate that's happening today and all the time. So let's pretend I'm a sales leader. I've got a team of 3 reps. I've got Mike, Amanda, and Rebecca. Close rate is insurance jargon for how many policies do I bind over how many quotes have I done. So I've got Mike closing at 15%, Amanda at 20%, and Rebecca at 25%. So I look at last month's performance. They all did 100 quotes. Rebecca closed 25. She's clearly my star. She wrote the most business for me. I'm going to give her praise. I'm going to highlight her on my sales call for the week. Amanda's doing a really nice job. Mike, I need to either invest in really expensive coaching, maybe get some external or internal coaching, or have a really serious conversation if Mike's performance keeps up, because maybe insurance sales is not the right career path for him. And what we've done is use the structured data we have and come up with a benchmark. So we do millions and millions of quotes a year, and given the 100 quotes that each of they produce, we can create a score that says, here's what I would have expected a producer on average to close over those 100 quotes. So I have a benchmark close rate. And I can actually see the story flips. So big surprise, right, from what you saw with Mark, where we're going on this. But actually, Mike's not my worst performer. Mike's my best performer. Given Mike's mix of business that he's quoting, he might be quoting lower quality risks. If you're lower quality risk in insurance, that means you're a higher risk for us. That means your price is going to be higher. If your price is higher, you're going to bind at a lesser rate. So maybe Mike's working like web leads and he's doing outbound sales. And Rebecca is maybe working referrals from a mortgage broker who's just saying, hey, here's a homeowner that's buying right now and they need a quote and they can't buy their house until they get that quote. But she's leaving business on the table and Amanda's just exceeding her benchmark slightly. So now I actually need to figure out what Mike is doing and then coach perhaps Rebecca up on some opportunities that Mike's doing really well. So this type of framework and benchmarking allows me to know who's like good or bad or who's adding to the equation or not adding to the equation. But what I lack and what voice can help us understand is the context for why Mike is leading his benchmark and why Amanda is perhaps falling back. So when you incorporate something really important, we think, like ask for the sale, you find out that Mike's actually asking for a sale at the rate of 3 times that Rebecca is. And so I can praise Mike for that. Maybe Mike's got some other opportunities, like he's not pushing additional products for a multi-line sale. And Rebecca is, maybe a coachable moment for her is figuring out how to break into that ask for the sale conversation throughout, maybe through assumptive selling, or at the end, just recapping what we've provided to her or to the consumer on that day and really making it a more of an aggressive close. You could think about different events that occur from building the relationship, building rapport, finding common ground at the very beginning part of the conversation, to meeting and assessing the needs and offering products to that, to eventually closing the sale at the end. This gives us a framework now to not only ensure we keep the right talent around because we can benchmark performance for what an average rep might do with those quotes that an individual did, but then also through voice and the capture and analysis of what are the drivers of benchmark lift over actual for what those things are. And then we can get really prescriptive. So this isn't about getting rid of Mike or Rebecca. This is about identifying through the 10,000 plus producers that we have out there, each of them probably has a different opportunity area. and we want to understand what that prescriptive opportunity area is, provide them good coaching, sourcing the best practices from the entire system, and eventually everybody should start creeping up against that benchmark and hopefully exceeding that. And as a whole, we have the same producer population, but we're writing a lot more business as a result. This can also be put into education programs at scale. So not only it's who's out there, but as we're onboarding new producers, how do we coach them with the best practices that are being sourced from the entire population today so they don't form bad habits perhaps. So that's a little bit about how taking structured and unstructured data is helping change the evaluation of performance within our sales force today. And I'm gonna throw it back to Tien for a close.
Thanks. So just to wrap things up, everybody knows in sales, ABC, always be closing and also ask for the sale. And from a data and analytics perspective, I'll call it ABCD, always be collecting data. So this applies regardless of industry, right? Mark talked about from an investments perspective, whether you're in marketing or in sales or whatever industries and companies that you're representing as well. I think it's really important to bring together and collaborate with the right folks across your organization, business, technology, analytics, and the data strategy group to figure out what are the information, what are the data that we need to be able to collect, how are we going to be able to solution to be able to analyze it, identify what the insights are, to be able to really impact the bottom line and to be able to introduce a lot more positive experience for consumers. So as a final takeaway, I would say that by doing so and collaborating, you'll be able to answer a lot more of those if I only knew questions that land in your email or in your inbox every single day. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, so the question was how do we land on ask for the sale as the call event? Not intentionally just that one, right? I think there potentially could be hundreds of different events that we want to capture throughout the sales process, and we need to put together a framework that tells us ask for the sale is the first most important thing in the sales process, or maybe it's number 58 on the list. Anecdotally, we don't think we ask for the sale enough, and if we aren't doing that, then how are we supposed to close some business? It was really more illustrative to this example. It could be taken, overcoming objections, right? Yeah. And overcoming objections throughout each step of the way, and putting that in that context as well.
So you said MDMs are like a new strategy for you guys. What's the team, or how's the whole process look like where you guys just like made a cognitive effort that we're going to go out and collect data and make that core?
Thanks for the question. So our most mature MDM is our consumer MDM, and it was a natural place where we wanted to start because we have a lot of different applications, and as we interact across the customer journey, we wanted to create some consistency. So regardless of channel, if you're interacting with a call center rep or with an agent or on the web, how can we present consistent information and to deliver more insights? So it was easy for us, based on our natural business processes, to want to center and centralize a lot of our customer data first. Then we evolved and identified more business opportunities and more use cases that required us to think about these other data domains where we wanted to also centralize data, because whether it was location data or vehicle data, for example, in terms of our assets, we also wanted to create this best view or promoted view that could be leveraged across the organization. So we also have other insurance companies, Esurance, Encompass, that we also wanted to be able to centralize and tap into the same data so that we could be smarter about the data purchases that we were making and be able to reuse a lot of information. And I think the way that we identified the strategy to move forward with that is to be able to centralize, govern, and make sure that it was available not only for analytics, but also for operational purposes as well. Thanks for the follow-up question as well. So about 6 years ago, we established our first chief data officer as part of the business. and it was part of a new organization, so the data and analytics strategy team. And it was through this group, probably 12 when we were a startup of data and analytics strategy team, that helped to define and shape some of the strategy in partnership with our technology counterparts. And then over time, we also merged with the analytics team so that we could help to prioritize what data would be used for specific analytic initiatives that we wanted to move forward quickly and build momentum as well. So I would say a combination of both business and technology to help bring it to light. Hi.
I mentioned a little bit how data scientists can use MDM for development and how MDMs can be.
Sure. So our MDMs and this centralized information, so we want to make it available in like an operational database so that it can be used by APIs and be able to be retrieved by some of our applications in real time, but also be able to make this data available in our big data environment so that it's available for our analytic teams to be able to use in a production or research environment to do exploratory discovery work, develop new models, and then be able to curate information, partnering with some of our analytic engineering capabilities as well to be able to formulate some insights that we can then I would say promote up or elevate into those operational systems to tap into through the APIs.
I think the key is bringing together the development environment and then seamlessly transitioning the models from research into production off the same set of information. It reduces the ETL time necessary to transition the scoring processes of models.
Cool. One last one over here I saw.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. It was really fascinating. And that use case that you brought up of evaluating the performance for your sales agents at the end is very compelling. What sub-goals have you broken that down into? And what sort of timelines are involved with that vision? Because I imagine, building out that entire system would take a while. And so, have you identified any sort of low-hanging fruit in that process that you can sort of achieve first to show initial results?
Yeah, so I'd love to talk a little bit more offline because I know we're running up on time here. But I think it really starts with of capturing the data, and that's really in the phase where we're at right now, is trying to just get our arms around this megalith distribution system that we have today so we can start sourcing this. I think the emphasis right now is just even sharing out the benchmark component, right? So we know who's doing better or worse relative to what we might expect. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in just taking that out to market while we continue to work on capturing the right voice elements and then putting that to a driver framework that allows us to say what are the correct voice elements that are driving lift over your benchmark. But happy to discuss a little bit after this because I know we're hogging up some extra time on this one.
All right, so thank you very much. We'll put you on the stage.
Thank you.